Hello friends, today we're going to be making a flower tapestry, and it's going to be the first episode of this series because I just think they are, flowers is a very common thing to do in tapestry, but I think that right now, since we are all waiting for the Bridgerton's part 2, I think it's apropos to do a tapestry. And I was specifically inspired by the scene where Francesca and Penelope are talking, and she was just like, hey, it's difficult to become, to get out of the wall if you stick to the wall. So I just think it was, I don't know. The arrangements are very pretty on every ball, so it's going to be the very first episode of this series, and we're going to be making a balloon flower. Well, this is going to be a series of flowers, like I just said, but it's going to be a complete beginner's guide. So I'm going to try and dedicate my time to explaining each and every step on doing these tapestries, especially because I'm not going to be using our regular crochet method or our regular crochet stitch. We're going to be using a Tunisian simple stitch. And as you can see, this is the pattern that I'm following. You can always find these patterns on Pinterest. I find that I just like whatever I'm going to find, like, or whatever I'm going to like look for. It's like flowers and then anything like pixel art. And as you can see, I think the most important part of these tapestries is identifying your colors, especially when it comes to like intricate designs such as flowers. And I'm going to be doing one flower by one flower, like one species of flowers, and then like I'm not going to be making a bouquet with different types of flowers. And God knows I do not know my flowers, but I'm going to try and name these flowers. And I believe these flowers are called bell flowers or balloon flowers. They have all different meanings. They're like the little cup holders of nature, and I absolutely love them. I think they're mostly like purplish, bluish colors. I'm going to opt to make a blue bellflower. And like I said before, I do not know my flowers, but these are, I think they're pretty much a very simple design, and it's elegant. You can make it into a tapestry, or of course, if you know how to embroider, you can embroider these onto a sweater or a skirt or your pants or whatever you like. You can always do that. You can always take any pattern, especially if it's like a pixel art pattern. And the most crucial part is that each square counts for a stitch, and of course that's gonna come in handy once we begin our tapestries. So like I said before, identifying your colors is probably the most important thing on any tapestry. So I have this blue and this dark blue for the actual bell flower part. I have a darker version and then a lighter version for like shadows and stuff. And then we also have like the stem for the leaf, and the bottom part of the flower, which I have a darker green, and then we have I know it doesn't look like difference, but I assure you that they are different colors. Darker green and then a very lighter green. And then I'm going to choose and do this beige background, and the actual pattern, it's very much beginner friendly because it gives us like the actual colors on the bottom. And of course you can make it as big or as small as you like. I'm going to be making this a smaller piece, and for that I'm going to be using a 4mm hook. It's a longer, slightly longer hook for Tunisian, stitches. You can, since it's a smaller project, you can always get away with you using your regular crochet hook. So enough yapping, let's begin. I know, I don't know if you can hear it, but it kind of sounds like I'm inside of a washing machine. I can reassure you that I'm not. I just have my air conditioning on, and it's hot here in Texas, and I'm sorry if you hear like the buzzing sound of my air conditioning. But let's begin with our background. So if you don't know, we are going to do a, what is it called? A slip stitch. And by doing that, we grab the end of our yarn on our thumb, and then we wrap this is our working yarn onto two of our fingers, like so. And we grab this initial wrap, we pull it back onto this working yarn, and then we pull that second strand, and there we go. We have our slip stitch or slip knot or whatever you want to call it, and then we pull onto both our tail and our working yarn. And we're going to chain 21. So we're going to grab our yarn and pull through, and that's going to be 1 and 2 and 3, and we're going to be doing this all the way until we have 21 stitches. And of course, always take your time when doing your foundation chains, especially because we don't want to, move our pattern around or add or remove any stitches that might be, well, they are all crucial stitches. Like every stitch is a very important stitch, and you can, as you get more advanced, you will probably master like I do, master whenever you miss a stitch or you add a stitch. But as of right now, we want to kind of like focus on doing this right. And we're going to be using a Tunisian simple stitch, like I said, and we're going to turn our chains onto the back, and we're going to work onto these back loops that you see on your chains. They're like your chains that, connect your other chains. If that makes any sense, but onto these back bumps. And we're going to skip this very first bump, so we do not look at this bump at all. So, and the reason being is because we have this we have this loop on our hook, and it already counts as one. So if we insert our hook and we pull our other loops, we're going to end up with one more stitch that we want, and we don't want that, right? So we skip this very first bump, we go to the very second one because we're doing our very second loop. So we insert our hook onto that bump, we pull our yarn, we yarn over and we pull our yarn, and we keep our stitches and our hook. Make it a little bit loose so that you don't have any problems with your tension. But as of right now, we have 2 stitches in our hook, and we're going to continue to do that all the way down our row, and we should end up with 21 stitches in our hook. And this is all a solid color, so let's not worry about color changing or any of that sorts. Your hook should look just like mine with 21 loops on your hook. This is why I kind of recommend a Tunisian hook, but you can always get away with using your regular crochet hook if it's a little bit longer. I know it's a little bit longer, but you should have your loops kind of like not super loose but not super tight like this. So we want them nice and relaxed. And then for our Tunisian simple stitch, we have our forwards and we also have our backwards. So we're actually going to create our stitch right now on going backwards. It's called a return pass, and for our return pass we're going to chain one onto that very last stitch. So this stitch, we're going to grab our yarn, pull through it, and just pulling through that last stitch. We're going to grab our yarn and pull through two of our stitches. So we're going to pull through this one and this one, pulling through two, and we're going to repeat this step all the way down our row. And it should look something like this. This is our foundation, and our very next row is going to be our repeat row. What that means is just that we're going to repeat this very next row, the forwards and the backwards, all the way down until we finish our project. So on our very next row we have a color. We're adding a color. It's just for one stitch, but at last is a very important step. But always remember that we have a stitch on our hook that counts as one, and we're going to insert our hook onto that very front post only. So this very loop right here of our previous row. So we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, and pull. And we count these loops as, you know, stitches. So we have one stitch, two stitches, and again we have that front loop, and we're going to insert our hook and pull through, always making sure it is kind of like loose. And we're going to continue to do that for 10 stitches. So we already have 4 stitches on our hook and we need 6 more. And this is the point where counting is far more important than anything else. Always count your stitches again. Always making sure that we have the right amount of stitches. And I think it's not needless to say, but if you're following the pattern, of course, if you're following the pattern that I'm following, every square is a stitch. So if you count your stitches, every little square it just counts as a stitch. So not getting lost on that step, hopefully. And we're gonna grab our lightest shade of green, and we're going to grab it like so, and we're going to, this is how we're going to grab our little tail, put it on the back of our project, and we're going to insert our hook onto the very next loop. And instead of yarning over with our background color, we're going to yarn over with our light shade of green. And this is just going to be one stitch, so we just drop it. We're gonna drop our color. We're going to pick up our background color, and we're going to continue and pull with our background color. It doesn't make a lot of sense right now, but it will make sense at the end. And this very last stitch can get a little bit tricky. If you turn your little work, you can see that you have two little loops onto the this stitch right here. So you can see there's a little square. We're going to insert our hook onto, excuse me, we're going to insert our hook onto that loop, and we're going to catch those two loops right here. So we insert our hook, and those two loops should be caught on our stitch. And there we go. So we should have 10 background stitches, one green and another 10 background stitches. So we are going to begin our return pass, and for that we're going to pull our yarn or chain one onto our last stitch. Again, I'm going to do a demonstration. I'm sorry, I'm not good at explaining, but I'm trying. I'm sorry. We're going to chain one, so we grab our yarn, pull through one of our stitches, and this is going to be true for all of our rows for our return pass. We're going to grab our yarn and pull through two of our stitches, and we're going to pull through two of our stitches all the way until we reach that green stitch. So right here, when we pull through our very last two stitches of our background color, so we pull through 1 and 2 of this beige color, we're going to drop our beige. We're going to drop it, and we're going to grab our green, and we're going to pull through that first stitch, which is our beige color, and through our green. The reason being is that whenever you have two different color stitches on your hook, you always use that second color stitch to pull through two of our stitches. So if your first color, in this case we have a green color, and if your second color is a different color, in this case a beige, we're going to use this beige color to pull through. So we drop our green, we pull up our beige, and we're going to pull through our green and through our beige. And as you can see, we now have a stitch of a green color, and we pull through two all the way down. Our very third stitch is going to be exactly the same. So 10 stitches of our background color, one stitch, so your green stitch should be over here right on top of this green stitch that we already created, and then 10 more background color stitches. And this is how your project should be looking like. I know it can take a little bit of time to get used to it, but if you'd like, if your project is curling too much, is because you have a little bit of a tighter tension. But what I do is that sometimes I just, forget that I'm actually, doing something, and I forget that I have my tension very tight, so I just put a little clasp on the bottom of my project, and there we go. It's just a little bit simple to get our project out of the way. So for our very next row, which is in this case is our fourth row, we're going to do 10 more rows, or 10, excuse me, not rows, 10 more stitches of this background color. And then we're going to do one stitch of this light green color. Pretty simple, just like we've been doing. And now I'm going to add my very next color. In this case, I'm going to be using this darker green. But what I'm going to do is, because our little two stems, we have a leaf which is a darker green, and then we have our stem for another flower, and I'm going to unwind and make another cake of this very same green color. And now we have two different cakes of this very dark green color. I'm going to set one aside, and we're going to use one for the time being because we're just going to add one stitch, and we're going to remember grabbing our yarn, pulling it, and then our very next stitch we're going to insert our hook and then yarn over with our very new color. In this case, we just have this green and this darker green for this row. We're going to drop it, and we're going to continue with our background color. So now, instead of having 10 and 10 background color stitches, we're gonna have 10, one light green, one darker green, and then 9 background color stitches. Let's do our return pass. We're gonna pull and pull like we've been doing, chaining one onto the very last stitch and then pulling through 2, 2 and 2 all the way until we get onto our very newest rule that we added, is that we have 2 different color stitches on our hook. We always use that second color stitch. Dropping our background color, picking up our darkest green color, we're going to pull through our beige and our dark green, and again we're going to use that very light green color. Dropping our dark green color, picking up our light, and we're going to pull through that green color and our light color green, and again dropping both of our greens, picking up our background color and pulling through 2 all the way down our row. And this is how it should be looking like. I know that the color differences are very subtle, but I promise you that in real life you can actually see this a little bit better. But as of right now, I'm going to leave part one of our bellflower tutorial right here. Of course, I'll always leave down below the materials that I'm using, the Pinterest pin that I'm following. The link to everything is down below.